I'm Imtiazul Huda. I will present Faraizi movement. Dear learners and students, as you are observing or seeing the map of the Faridpur district, this particular map will help us to learn about that from where this particular movement had started. First of all, introducing the Faraizi movement. It was a first of all, learning about the socio-religious condition that had led to the beginning of the Faraizi movement. Exactly what was the scenario? When we look into the beginning of the Faraizi movement, what we found that this movement had emerged in Bengal in the 19th century. And the person who is responsible or to whom we gave a credit of laying foundation to the Faraizi movement was Haji Shariatullah. As in the lecture to come, we will learn about his biography. That he was a person of the late 18th and the 19th century. So, examining the socio-religious condition of the late 18th and the 19th century, that what we found that during this period, the socio-religious condition of the Muslim peasantry was deteriorating. It was in the Bengal region. Now this particular region is in the Bangladesh. And there the Muslims were living in a very deprived condition. When Haji Shariatullah got raised up, he saw that his fellow Muslims are facing tremendous troubles. They are economically very weak. They are politically very weak. They are socially very weak. And as well as on the religious aspect, their creeds and their religion is not the good, was not in a good condition. The peoples were following different norms and trends, though by name they were the Muslims, but through practices they can't be called as the Muslim. As I have just said about the political condition, what happened in 1757, Battle of Plassey was fought between Siraj-ud-Dawla and the Britishers. In that battle, Siraj-ud-Dawla lost, and the Bengal was captured by the Britishers. And this has resulted into the wretched and deplorable condition of the Muslim. And this further resulted that many Muslims were exploited by the Hindu landlords, because in that region, though the ruler was the Muslim, but the majority of the landlord was the Hindus. And as they were the subject class under the Hindu landlord, somehow the practices of their landlord got introduced into their practices. That has influenced them very much, and that resulted into the deviation in their practices. So they got deviated from the orthodox practices of Islam. Further, we can about the origin of the Wahhabi movement, as I have just now said. The foundation was laid down by Haji Shariatullah in 1818 AD after he returned back performing Hajj from that holy cities, Mecca and Medina. When he was at Mecca and Medina, what he found there, a new awakening. And that awakening was of the Wahhabi movement. And the teachings of the Wahhabi movement has inspired him very much. He tried to analyze the conditions of the Muslims of Bengal. And he came to understand because the Muslims of the Bengal are not firm on their faith, and this is the root cause of the deprived condition because they are not following Islam in a perfect manner. Whatsoever were flourishing in the society, they adopted, they accepted, and they started practicing. The Sufi culture was very much prevalent in Bengal, and they considered this Sufi culture as the best one. This has further led in the mixing of their thought. Many superstitious thought and creed were introduced in them. So, Haji Shariatullah, after returning back from Makkah and Medina, where he had performed Hajj, he started a movement. His first concept was to introduce the obligatory duties among the Muslim community. And he talked about the farz. What are the obligatory things for the Muslims? By which, by following that, they can be firm on their faith. That's why, as he has insisted on the farz, the obligatory duties, this particular movement came to be known as the Faraizi movement, based on the farz, a movement of the farz, implementing the first thing in the Muslim society of Bengal. Understanding the objectives of the movement, what was the objective and why Haji Shariatullah has laid foundation to the Faraizi movement. His primary objective was Islamic purification and as well as socio-economic improvement. By Islamic purification, we can understand that this particular movement was aimed to eliminate un-Islamic customs, innovations, and the influence of other religions from Bengal. What the Bengali Muslims were following and practicing. Some of the Bengali Muslims even started revering the deities also, considering that they are an incarnation of the God and they are helpful for their or beneficial for their life. So this was the thing. He wanted to introduce the pure Islam in the Bengali Muslim society, free from all sort of evils. The another that I have mentioned, the socio-economic improvement, as I have just said, economically they had become very weak. They became the peasant class. They were working under the landlord as a peasant. So this particular movement was aimed to address the socio-economic grievances of the Muslim peasant. And it was to advocate for fair treatment and protection from oppression, because prisons were always and all times subject to the oppression and tyranny also. So this movement was to address their grievances and to save them from such type of persecution and oppression. Another important aspect is he tried to eliminate the non-Islamic or un-Islamic practices of the Bengali Muslims. For this one, he has an objective of purifying the religious practices. His main goal was to remove the un-Islamic customs and bidat, that is innovation, from the Bengali Muslims' religious life. The un-Islamic customs, many customs that were prevailing in Bengal, that were very much inspired by the other faith, other religion. And that has no authenticity in Islam. So he want to purify, to remove such sort of custom, because he considered these un-Islamic customs that has been adopted by the Bengali Muslim is affecting their religious life. And just because of that one, their faith is getting tarnished. And he further addressed that these are the bid'ah, the innovation. And in Islam, there is no space for innovation. So innovation creates blunder. Another important aspect of this one was targeting the non-Muslim and Sufi influences. Many customary things have been amalgamated in the Muslim society, and as well as the Sufi influence was at the great length. We can say the Chishtiya Sufi order was very much practiced by the people of this region. And the practices of the Chishtiya Sufi order has, in due course of time, got distorted. And the distorted influence was wrong to the society. So the practices of the non-Muslim traditions and the Sufi mysticism were considered as a deviation from the teachings of Islam. What were the teachings of Islam? Simply, we understand the 5 pillars of Islam. These are the basic teaching of Islam. First one is Tawheed. The second one is Salat. The third one is Saum. The fourth one is Zakat. And the fifth one is the Hajj. That by Tawheed, it means to consider, to understand the oneness of Allah Almighty. By Salat, it means to perform 5-time daily prayer, which is a compulsory for every Muslim to offer a prayer. So, it is a fasting. During the holy month of Ramadan, it is compulsory for every Muslim to fast for a complete 1 lunar month. It is an article of faith. Then the payment of zakat. Every eligible person who is capable of earning should pay a zakat. Zakat is basically considered as purifying one's wealth. In Quran, we found in Surah Tawbah, the verse number 60, which is talking about the expenditure of the zakat. And in the Quran, it is said that وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, establish prayer and pay zakat. The importance is verily mentioned in the Quran. And the people of the Bengal, the Muslims, were not adhering to that one. They were not aware about that one. The wealthy persons were not paying the zakat because zakat were to be utilized for the welfare and benefit of the community, for the people, whosoever is. And the last one is the Hajj. It is also a duty of a Muslim that once in a lifetime, if he can afford, he should perform a Hajj. So that's why, so he was against the Sufi influences and the non-Muslim customs that were prevailing. Apart from these one, there are three fundamental teachings of Islam. So that the Muslims were not following that three fundamental teachings of Islam. So they had got deviated from that one. So the aim of the Faraizi movement was to bring people toward this teaching, the teachings of Islam. Socio-economic justice for the Muslim peasants. It was an important aspect of the Faraizi movement. Through this, they were addressing the socio-economic grievances. The main purpose or the main aim of the Faraizi movement was to resolve the socio-economic issues faced by the Muslims. It was basically the pay disparity and as well as non-payment of their due. They were working hard in the fields of the landlords, in the houses of the landlords, in the warehouses of the landlords, and they were not paid as per their labor and hard work. Even they were deprived of. If somehow they asked for the payment, they were thrashed, they were beaten. Somehow they were beaten up to the death also. So for this one, that has been addressed by the Faraizi movement. It was to talk about them that they had a right to live, they had a right to earn, they had the right to say, and whatsoever work they are, they should get their proper due in time. Further, they had advocated for the fair treatment. Here we can say that Haji Shariatullah championed, he advocated very effectively the fair treatment and the land right for the Muslim peasantry. What happened after the Battle of Plassey? Majority of the land of the Muslims was confiscated by the Britishers. And some of the landlords who helped the Britishers, they were granted those lands. They captured the land of the Muslims who were once tilting their own land. They became the peasants of these lands. So Haji Shariatullah championed in this way that he had addressed this issue and he advocated their issues and demanded for fair justice from the landlords who were mistreating the peoples. Further, he was talking about the protection from oppression. This movement sought the protection of the peasants by the landlord and the Britishers. Here, I may say that majority of the Britishers has captured the land and started indigo plantation. And for the indigo plantation, they had employed those captured Muslims as a bonded slave. And day and night they were mistreated and they were forced to work. Their health was deteriorating. Their faith was shaking. They were becoming very weak. And they were not seeing any sort of ray of hope. So it was Haji Shariatullah. When he talked about the Faraizi, talk about the implementation of the first, he addressed that these reasons should be protected from the oppression. There were some basic tenets of the Faraizi movement. Before introducing his movement and making it public, Haji Shariatullah has talked about the core principles or the tenets or the doctrines of his movement that are about the strict adherence to the Quran and Sunnah, that is the teaching and practices of the Prophet Muhammad. Like the Wahhabi movement, though he was inspired, he also outrightly rejected shirk, the polytheism. He outrightly rejected the superstitious practices that were prevailing in the Bengali Muslim society. He outrightly rejected the visiting toward the soothsayers just because of the superstitious practices. Many Muslim Jews started visiting the soothsayers. They wanted to know about their future. Many fortune tellers used to distract them, used to play game with them. So he outrightly rejected and tried to convince that there is nothing in the soothsaying and fortune telling. Further, he has emphasized on Tawheed, the oneness of Allah Almighty. And he said, it is a first for every Muslim to be firm on Tawheed, that Allah is one. No one is comparable to Him, and no one is worthy of worshipping except Him. Furthermore, as I have said, he emphasized on the 5 pillars of Islam, that it is necessary for every Muslim to be firm on the 5 pillars of Islam, because being firm on the 5 pillars, it introduced piousness among us. And just because of the piousness, many wrongdoing can go away from us. By following this thing, we can rectify the evils which has been within us. Further, he had talked about the prohibition of the customary practices that were not sanctioned by the Islamic law, such as certain festivals and the rituals. There were many festivals and the rituals that are not in Islam, but it became customary. Just observing the tradition of the region, this got inside Islam, inside the practices of the Muslims. So he outrightly prohibited the Bengali Muslim, to follow such thing. There are only very few festivals in Islam. For example, the 2 Eids, the lesser and the greater one. Another one is the Ramzan, is a month of worship. These are the only one that they have to follow. Another important tenet was assertion of the right and dignity of the common Muslim peasantry. That every Muslim peasantry had a right and dignity, that they should not be tortured, they should be well treated, they should be given freedom from the bondage so that they can live freely and can work in a very healthy environment. Okay, thank you.